The extent to which what's called the kingdom of the world, the politics of the world, is being fused with our faith. In some cases, almost like a Taliban, Islamic State, where, you know, it's like we want to run a Christian society and enforce Christian laws. And my concern is that that is very damaging for the church, and it's also very damaging for society.
Boyd was raised a Catholic, lost his faith as a teenager, and then was born again at age 17. He studied religion at the Yale Divinity School and Princeton's Theological Seminary. As a professor, he taught theology for 16 years before feeling the full-time pull of the pulpit.
Be blessed.
How many people do you count in the flock here?
Judging from how full it is, whatever, on a typical weekend, it's around 4,000, I guess.
It's a lot, 4,000.
So, yeah.
Get your life from Jesus Christ. Get your life from Jesus Christ. All your life from Jesus Christ.
Visit Boyd's church and you'll hear a Christian message with a strong focus on personal relationships with Jesus Christ.
On the one hand, I'm a conservative Christian, and I am pro-life to the core of my being. I also believe that homosexuality misses God's ideal.
But listen to what Boyd says next.
But the Bible also says that gossip, in fact, right next to homosexuality, it mentions gossip, and it mentions greed, and it mentions gluttony. In fact, greed and gluttony are two of the most common sins held up in the ancient world as the supreme sins, and they're frequently mentioned in the Bible way more than homosexuality. I never quite understand what sin gradation scale some people go by where they decide that certain sins are worse than other kind of sins, and those are the ones we need to go against.
Be specific. In order to be pro-life, do you then have to support a candidate whose mission is to overturn Roe versus Wade?
Christiane, I don't think so. To be pro-life is not just to be concerned about the womb, it's to be concerned about life. For example, what's the relationship between poverty and abortion? And studies show that there's a direct correlation there. So maybe the best way to lessen abortion in society is to go for the candidate that you think is going to do the most for poverty. And so we need to take great care not to naively think that we can translate our particular value into a particular vote. Don't label your way of voting Christian.
Boyd's concerns over the fusion of faith and politics began building shortly after the first Gulf War, when he attended a video presentation at a 4th of July service at another church.
And there's patriotic music playing and a flag waving in the background. It showed a silhouette of 3 crosses. And 4 fighter jets came down over the crosses and split, with a flag waving in the background. And there were some people who stood up, and they were ecstatic. And I started crying, because I wondered, how is it possible that we went from being a movement of people who follow the Messiah, who taught us to love our enemies, to being a movement that celebrates fighter jets, that fuses Jesus' death on the cross with killing machines. And that was, I guess, a wake-up call to me about how serious this problem is among evangelicals in America.
Those feelings were reinforced prior to the last presidential election.
I, like many, probably most evangelical pastors, was getting a certain amount of pressure to steer the flock in a certain way. Here's how you should vote. And it was, in fact, the Republican way.
How does it work? What do? They call you? Tell me how that works.
What happens is there's a lot of Christian leaders out there on Christian radio and Christian television, and people in your congregation watch them. And so a lot of the questions come from the congregation saying, aren't you going to tell us how to vote, and aren't you going to this or whatever? The enemy isn't the liberals, and the enemy isn't the conservatives. The enemy's not the abortionists. The enemy's not the gay rights activists.
Instead, Boyd did something radically different. He preached a series of 6 sermons called The Cross and the Sword.
Whenever we find politicians who start quoting Bible verses to support their agenda, we ought to be the ones saying,
Many members of his congregation disagreed and told him so.
And after the message, a lady came up, a wonderful lady, sincere, God bless her heart, but she was livid, because she was saying, if you don't stop preaching liberal politics in the pulpit, I've got to leave. And I said, Yeah, ma'am, I'm quoting Jesus. Jesus said this.
A lot of your flock walked out, didn't they?
Yeah, we, over the long haul, lost roughly 1,000 people in the light of this message.
But as that 1,000 left, another 1,000 took their place.
But I'll tell you, I don't regret a thing. It was a turning point for our congregation. I felt that we got a clarity about a vision of the kingdom that we're supposed to be furthering.
Greg Boyd is a different kind of pastor, a man fighting to keep partisan politics out of the church, a man who dismisses the question, how would Jesus vote?
Jesus never so much as commented on the politics of his day, and he lived in a politically hot time. I mean, it was hot, a lot of hot button issues, and Jesus consistently refused. We're to follow his example.
When we return, would God be an environmentalist? I meet a Christian under fire for saying yes.
He told us to do that, to watch over and care for it, right in the book of Genesis, right there.
It's a windy spring day in Washington, D.C., and this man is creating a storm in the world of Christian politics.
Where are you on abortion?
Conservative, pro-life, have been for 25 years.
On same-sex marriage?
Conservative, oppose gay marriage.
So with statements like those, why are some of the biggest names of the religious right denouncing Richard Cizik? Because of statements like this.
And in fact, God's own word says, I, God, will judge those, destroy those who destroy the earth.
Cizik is preaching the gospel of saving the planet.
It's biblical environmentalism. It's biblical. It's being a steward of the earth. It's caring about issues that will impact millions of people, like climate change.
May we embrace your charge to watch over and care for all the creatures of the earth.
Cizik is a minister and vice president of the National Association of Evangelicals, an umbrella group that represents 45,000 churches and tens of millions of American Christians. He believes God created the earth and that man is failing to take care of it. Cizik calls his crusade creation care.
There's a reason why Jesus refers to hell in the New Testament as Gehenna. Gehenna was a garbage heap outside Jerusalem, so we as evangelicals don't want to turn this earth into a garbage heap, a hell on earth.
Cizik became an environmental activist reluctantly. He was invited to a conference on climate change in England in 2002. Not expecting to be moved by what he would hear.
I'm listening to the best scientists in the world assembled at Oxford present science that says the planet is at risk, and I'm literally having the scales come off my eyes.
You're saying it's the science that led you to this conclusion, whereas some of your fellow evangelicals, those who criticize your position, say it's precisely the science and their suspicion of science which caused them to doubt and to reject what you're doing.
Yeah, because historically evangelicals have reasoned like this. Scientists believe in evolution. Scientists are telling us climate change is real, therefore I won't believe what scientists are saying. It's illogical. It's an erroneous kind of syllogism, but is that what's been occurring? Absolutely.
That attitude has been changing. According to a recent poll, 70% of evangelicals now see global warming as a serious threat to future generations. But listen to the late Jerry Falwell, who thought the jury was still out on global warming.
And when you look at who's promoting it, the United Nations, no friend of the U.S. in most cases, and liberal clergymen, and some evangelicals who are uninformed.